Hi, this is Laura Dalton, and this is my case study for Module 11. So, the first section, Section 1, the summary. So, basically, the story or the case study revolves around Mr. Rhodes, the first year principal. There's been a decline in attendance, and during the past years at Golden Oak High School, the last year they had the lowest attendance rate of all the high schools in the district. So after Christmas holidays, Mr. Rhodes takes the attendance data from the first quarter and it's pulled for evaluation. 5 students from the total student body were identified as missing more than 10 days for the first semester. So, Mr. Rhodes is a first year principal in this position, and he's done some basic fact checking on the situation of each of the identified students. So, he finds that each student's situation is different based on their circumstances. Like we have Karen, who has missed a total of 10 days, and she has probably some family history that's causing this, and also he's found some issues with maybe not being reached out to through the counselor for some things that might be going on at home, and some parent requests for that. Then they have Tyrone, who's missed 14 days, and this seems to be mostly due to parent requests. Then we have Christina, who's the freshman, and she basically has most of her absences due to religious reasons, and the minister is actually the one that has provided those excusals, and the teacher has signed off on those as well. Then you have Carl, who's the 10th grader, and he's actually going to vocational school. He was referred to the truant officer. Parents aren't really involved, so that's another situation there. The father has stated that his son's attendance was family business and it's not controlled by the school, so there's not a lot of help there. The 5th student is John, who is the quarterback, and there seems to be some issues as far as with athletic directors allowing for attendance excusal, and for teachers not reporting his absences as well. Section 2, any legal and ethical issues. I see that harm may be done to the students based on the decisions made by the parents and the educators in this situation. This might include, but not be limited to, the lack of education based on the days missed, lower grades due to the days missed, and the lack of social and emotional learning based on days away from peers. I also found that this may be based on school board policies that have been loosely followed or ignored in many instances by teachers and different adults and staff in the building. As far as the counselor, it seems that counselor may be directly negligible for their failure to look at the attendance data and address the needs of students such as Karen, who might have needed contact from the counselor, and in that case she might not have been meeting her contract and her negotiated duties. And then we have the athletic director, who might have been in breach of his contract for excusing absences for the quarterback with injuries, which may be discriminatory towards other students, as well as the teachers who did not report his absences, because there were several teachers that did not do that. Section 3, synthesizing. The main sentence I would use for this particular case is educator and administrative oversight have a direct correlation to student attendance. I think one of the main reasons that there are laws in place for parents and what they have to do as far as a child's education is because it does take the educator and the administrator working together as a team to help with that attendance factor too. Parents aren't able to do it all on their own, and some parents aren't even trying to begin with. So it takes that oversight to increase attendance, I believe. Section 4 is the facts, so the things that we do know. First of all, we have a first-year male principal. We have 5 identified students, 2 females and 3 males. Several classroom teachers involved in excusal of absences. We have a counselor that may be lacking on their duties. A male athletic director that may be increasing on his actual duties and what is allowable. A minister, which brings up religious and ethical issues there, and several parents who either support education or are willing to take their child out for certain vacations. The place we're looking at is the suburban high school. It's close to a metropolitan area. School has served and responded to changes in the community for the last 55 years. And lastly, we have the program, which is a public high school that houses grades 9 through 12, provides 11 different team sports and 31 different clubs, as well as access to vocational programs. Some of the unknowns may be the patterns of the educators. Are these isolated incidents as far as these teachers not reporting these incidences, or these teachers excusing absences that aren't under direct board policy? Do we have other teachers handling attendance policies the same way? Do we have other teachers excusing for things that might not be qualified under the death, illness, or weather? Next, for the place, some unknowns might be how are grades being affected by attendance? Are teachers enforcing the 10% policy with chronic absences? Are students actually losing grades for this? And then lastly, for the program, what type of programs are already in place for students who are chronically absent? And how is attendance data being reported and used by staff and administration to help with that factor? Section 5, reviewing and prioritizing. If attendance continues to decline, it could be damaging for all stakeholders and the community. If stakeholders in this situation include the student, all stakeholders in this situation include the students in the school and all the educators in the building, the administrators, including the principal and the superintendent, parents, and the community as a whole. All of these people are actually stakeholders in what might happen with the attendance. I'm not really sure if all stakeholders have been consulted in this situation, just because this does also fall under a community issue, because with the lack of attendance brings down grades, lack of graduation in the community. So those can be all factors that affect the community, and I wasn't really sure if they had been consulted. There are still some unanswered questions as far as what other teachers are doing with these attendance policies, if the teachers involved are doing this across the board, or if it's just isolated incidences. But I do believe that there's enough information provided to make an evaluation and a decision as to where to start to fix the problem, at least. Section 6, options. When we consider taking no action, I believe in this case the problem would persist. So that's really, we would continue to see a decline in the absences. So I don't really think that might be the best option. The most comprehensive approach might be to go back to only excusals for death, illness, and weather, and not even principal discretion as far as just following the board policy straight across. The most liberal approach might be to just continue the attendance procedures as they are, but maybe tighten up on how the data is used and address the programs or lack thereof for the truant and chronically absent students. One other way might be to look at a more comprehensive but liberal approach. Bring attendance procedures back to the discretion of the principal. Other absences such as death, illness, and weather are all excused per board policy, and then the rest go through administration. Classroom teachers aren't allowed to excuse or handle absences, and looking at truancy and absence programs and reevaluate them based on student needs. Also looking at some training for the staff on how to use data appropriately. Section 7, when I'm evaluating these different approaches, I think the first one, take no action, really isn't even an option right now at this point, just because that would not help the situation. The most comprehensive approach may be too much too fast for all involved, and they may buck the system a little bit, so I don't think that's the best way to go. The most liberal approach probably wouldn't be effective either, because it wouldn't make a substantial enough change to the attendance problem. I think that the mixture of both the comprehensive and liberal approach is needed for this situation to ease all stakeholders into a new way of addressing attendance. So if I'm looking at that, the best option I think is for the situation is to use a multifaceted approach to the situation. That would include following a different approach that would be comprehensive and a little bit liberal. I think it would require different things going on all at once, including bringing all attendance procedures back to the principal. So everything's going to come back to the principal's discretion. They'll be the only one handling the absences. Classroom teachers are no longer to use or handle absences in any way. They're not going to do any of the excusals. Basic excusals as far as death, illness, and weather are obviously excused due to board policy, but anything else would be brought to the principal, and they would it would be at their discretion to excuse any of that. Truancy and absences programs are reevaluated. Staff is retrained on how to use this data to help the students, and some of the staff may need to be addressed privately as far as their own individual actions and what their actual duties are. So looking at implementation, the first thing is to set new expectations and to get training for attendance procedures for the staff. Board policy would be followed, and excused absences would include death, illness, or weather. All other absences would be directed to administration for approval, and no one else would be allowed to approve absences. Next, then I would address the staff individually, including the counselor and the athletic director, as far as school policies and procedures, and go over their individual duties. So these are the more tough conversations that I would have to have for this plan to be put in place, but conversations that would need to be had. Then I would look at each individual case with the 5 identified students to help them get the services or help that they needed to be successful. So going back and talking to Karen about what needs her family needs, what she needs, going back and talking to the quarterback, John, seeing how we can help him to both recover from his injuries but not lack in his education. So looking at each one of those individually. Then as a staff, we're going to start looking at attendance data and how we can use that information to address situations. Lastly, I'm going to start looking into programs that might already be in place to address attendance issues. And if something isn't in place, we're going to evaluate what changes can be made to be more effective. After that, After the procedures are in place, we're going to take a look at the data and see if the implementations have helped the situation. If no interventions are in place for programs for truancy, then we're going to start looking at ways to create